Do I think Jontay Porter is guilty of being involved in a sports betting scandal? Welcome back to the Green Beans Go channel. It's your host, me, and that is the question we will attempt to answer today. I realize that I'm a little bit late on this. The breaking news has already broke, and we're sitting at about a week after all of these incidents have unfolded, and I still think it's worth discussing, and that's, of course, why we're here today. I'm going to give you the background of this information in case you don't know what's played out over the last half a month, and then I'm going to give you my opinion on it and what I think is the most likely situation that has occurred. So we have to take a look back at two specific instances, and what I think, first of all, is very interesting is the fact that these two instances are so far apart, and I do think that plays a little bit into the strategy of if he is guilty, how it's set up. So the two instances that are most notable occurred on January 26th, a game the Raptors played the Kings, and March 20th, a game where they played the Clippers. So if we look at the Raptors' schedule, I've gone ahead and highlighted these two events for you. And before we talk about the two events specifically, I want to talk about some other things that I've noticed. What people are most likely going to say about him being guilty is the fact that he checked himself out of a game with an injury one game and an illness the other, and that leads him to playing a lot less minutes than he normally would. You can see I've highlighted a couple of other instances here throughout the gap in between where he's played little to no minutes. We have a 7-minute, a 7-minute, a 3-minute, and a 5-minute. So it's not like this guy plays tons of minutes every night. And these two outliers, the games where DraftKings saw this huge volume in his unders, we see though that happen on those days because he does play small minutes throughout the season. So that is an interesting piece of this puzzle that makes it a little bit harder to really lay down the hammer on this guy. But it is notable that he does get minutes for this team, and upwards of 20 minutes over the last month. So just something to keep in mind. We'll talk first about the Clippers. This was the game that was played on January 26th, and I'll read part of this that was published by ESPN. There was an increased betting interest on his under props, where his total points were set at 5.5, his rebounds were set at 4.5, and his assists were set at 1.5. There was also an over-under for his threes made at 0.5. That evening, he played just 4 minutes before leaving the game because he re-aggravated an eye injury that he had a couple days earlier with the Grizzlies. He didn't score, but he had 3 rebounds, which we'll talk about in a second. 1 assist, didn't shoot a 3, meaning all of his under props hit. The next day, as part of a daily report to users on betting results, DraftKings stated that the under on his three-pointers was the biggest money winner for bettors that evening. So what stands out to me? One is the fact that he can control whether he leaves for an eye injury, and no one else can tell him if it's real or not. You can't tell me if my eye hurts, right? Only I can say that, and I can lie to you, and there's no way to really prove that. So him having full control over this hypothetical injury is probably the first red flag to me that Jontay might be guilty. The other thing that I think is interesting is 4.5 rebounds was his line. And if he's guilty, he probably knew what his line was. And he had 3 rebounds in 4 minutes. That is insane. I mean, that is a large number of rebounds for a small number of minutes. And it sketches me out a little bit because it panics me, right? If I am someone who is involved in betting my unders or telling people to bet my unders or what have you, and I know that I have 3 in 4 minutes, I'm going to get myself out of that game as quickly as I can. So the fact that he was able to grab 3 rebounds and then check himself out, I think is also a red flag. And he realized he couldn't just fake his way through, because what's he going to do if he gets 4, right? If he gets 4, then the next ball that bounces in his lap, is he just not going to grab it? Is he just going to let it bounce to an opponent? So that is interesting. And all of that is interesting, coupled with the fact that DraftKings is saying that the biggest money winner for bettors were Porter's unders. For a guy that's so insignificant in the NBA, not an insult, just factual, to have him be the guy who pays out the most people, a little bit sketchy. But this was the first instance, okay, in January. The next night, or 2 nights later, he goes on to play 19 minutes, 3 of 4 for 3, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. So it's not like this is something that this guy was doing often. And I think if you are guilty of doing it, a nice cover up would be to come back the next day and kind of ball out so that maybe people don't look into it anymore. The second instance, and the instance that ultimately I think was the straw that broke the camel's back, was almost 2 months later, on March 20th, so very recently to today, against the Kings. He played 3 minutes before exiting for an illness. No further details have been given. He did not score. He had 1 shot attempt and he had 2 boards. His points were 7.5. His boards were 6, 5.5. The next day, again, DraftKings notes that Porter's prop bets were the #1 moneymaker from the night in the NBA. At least one other U.S. sports book, okay, so we don't know what that is, FanDuel, ESPN Bet, could be any of these, detected unusual betting interest on Porter props in the games. A sportsbook industry source told ESPN that multiple betting accounts attempted to bet large amounts, upwards of $10,000 to $20,000, on Porter unders in January against the Clippers. So that would have been, 2 months prior. Betting limits are typically about $1,000 to $2,000 on player props, probably for reasons like this, a safeguard for these books to have in place. So 20 to 10 to 20,000 on a guy who comes off the bench for a team. That's going to raise flags. You have to know something. You have to have inside information, or you're an addict and a complete degenerate. So in this game, again, he played 3 minutes. He had 2 rebounds. And the next day, or 2 days later, he comes back and he has a decent stat line. So just really interesting stuff. And Friday, the 22nd, was actually the last game he's played in the NBA since. So I want to talk about 2 other things before we talk about my opinions on the matter, what I actually think about this. This was an article that I found, and it talks about Porter's interest in all things financial. We know that he's been involved in some sort of cryptocurrency financial investment situation that's on Discord and was connected to his Twitter. And also, this shows up. TayTrades11 is his or was his Twitter account. And it says that he has at least once promoted gambling on college basketball. In March of 2022, he promoted a parlay during the 3rd round of March Madness tournament, in which he makes a comment about winning this parlay. Shout out to Spazin for the easy parlay. So what this tells me is we know that Jontay Porter understands sports betting. He knows how it works, and he has had history participating in it. Now, he was not on an NBA roster at the time of this tweet. He had gotten cut from the Grizzlies a few months prior, and so he was allowed to be betting on this. And I believe the bylaws for the NBA are you cannot bet on NBA-related events, but you can bet on other sports so long as you're allowed to bet based on your location. So if it's legal in your state, you can bet on baseball if you want. You can bet on college basketball if you want, which I won't weigh in on what I think about that. I do know they can't bet on NBA, though. So there was nothing wrong with what he did here, but it tells me that he understands sports betting. He understands how things work. The second thing, he was tagged in a post from Nomad Trader sharing a Discord screenshot claiming good value in a playoff pick for 2022 NBA playoff betting on the Grizzlies, the year that Porter was waived by them. So it's just kind of interesting that this guy was connected to the Grizzlies, and then he was tagged in a post that endorsed the Grizzlies to make the playoff. So again, just goes to show that this TayTrades account, or his account, was connected to sports betting in some way. So let's talk about the 3 most likely outcomes of how we got here. All right. And I've sorted these by not likely to likely. First of all, do I personally believe that Jontay Porter bet on himself, actually physically placed wagers on his own lines? No, I don't think anybody is that stupid. That is the easiest way to get caught. It would be incredibly difficult to hide that. And I don't think a guy who understands sports betting and knows the situation and understands finance and cryptocurrency and is involved in that sort of hobby, I think they know better than to do that. So did he bet on himself? I'm going to say no. He is in no way connected. We're not going to find any DraftKings accounts, any FanDuel accounts in his name that has bets on him. Okay, we're just not. Do I think he was set up by the mob, perhaps, by some sort of crime organization? I think that's more likely than him betting on himself, but I'm still going to say no. I don't have any proof either way of this. I just think it's slightly unrealistic that, maybe it's possible that if he's involved in, these Twitter accounts and these Discords, that someone could have gotten wind of him, controlling outcomes, and maybe blackmailed him in some way and said, hey, if you don't, check yourself out of a game with an injury in this game and this game 2 months apart, then, we have information that, I don't know. But I'm saying that it's more likely than him betting on himself. Do I think it happened? No. Do I think that potentially he told some people that are close to him, friends or family, hey, on these nights we can make some money? I think that's the most likely outcome. Am I saying that he did it? Not necessarily. But am I saying that the evidence is mounting against him? Yes. So let's talk about what that would mean. First of all, I would imagine that all communication that occurred to set this up was in person, or they had some sort of code with texting or maybe a phone call. Again, I think Jontay Porter is smart enough to understand that it would be easy to get caught if there is traceable evidence. So what I think would be most realistic and likely is that he is hanging out with some friends on an off day, and he says, hey, look, on this day against this team, I want you to bet my unders. And not only do I want you to bet my unders, I want you to parlay my unders, right? Because what I did this morning was I went on and I looked. If you parlayed a player's under points, rebounds, assists, and threes, you get about a 10-1 bet. So all it would take was somebody to make a parlay with unders of all categories for a player and to, bet $10,000 on it. You just made $100,000. So we saw those bets, right? DraftKings said $10,000, $20,000 bets were placed on these players. So for some people, $100,000 is life-changing money. Jontay Porter makes about $400,000 to $500,000 for his NBA contract. So you're telling me one parlay and you got a quarter of an NBA player salary. So I think there had to be some sort of in-person communication, because I do want to give credit to Jontay and say at least he's smart about this. If you're going to be involved in something this dangerous, probably this, life-changing, if you're caught, you're going to want to have some precautions. The only thing that I don't know if it was thought about is DraftKings can track these people, right? If they see the accounts that are connected to these massive bets on Jontay Porter's unders, all they would have to do is say, okay, this account belongs to this person at this address. And the internet is such a vast place, and technology is so easy to track these things. It would be fairly easy to connect a person's social security number, address, phone number, name to Jontay Porter. How can they know each other, right? I think that's very reasonable to expect DraftKings to be able to, or the investigators to find that information out. The only other thing I can think of is a friend of a friend, right? Let's say I know an NBA player, and I have gotten word that an NBA player is going to tank against the Clippers in January, right? If I know that I could be caught and guilty, I can outsource this, and I can say, hey, I'm not going to bet it, but I'm going to tell my uncle. I'm going to tell my friend. I'm going to tell a coworker, hey, look, I have information, right? Bet this, this, and this on this night, all right? And it's going to change your life, and so you're going to give me a cut, and potentially I'm going to give Jontay a cut, right? Again, I'm getting into the weeds here, but you understand the point. That would be harder to track. So if these guys are good, maybe that's the route that they took. But I do think friends is the most likely situation, and if I was going to say that he was guilty, I would say that he was guilty by way of giving information to his friends. A couple things I want to talk about now is what happens. This has been quiet for a week. We are a week removed from this, and I have not heard a peep of anything. So an investigation is probably still underway, and I don't know what we're going to hear, but I do think it's interesting we haven't heard anything. NBA ban is probably the most likely for Jontay. I think you have to throw the book at this guy. I think you have to really set the precedent here and say this is unacceptable. If you're connected even in any way, not if you're placing bets, right? But if you're connected to people placing bets on the outcomes of your games and you knowingly do things in the game to influence that, you're going to lose. Like the NBA is lucky that it's not somebody important. Forgive me, Jontay, but they are, and I think they have some wiggle room to be very aggressive with their punishment for him. As far as the sports books go, I don't know if their bylaws, if their terms and conditions state that they are protected in these instances, if money can be revoked from these players. I think it'd be very hard to do considering they've probably already withdrawn it. It's already in their bank account, but something to keep in mind. Again, I think they have to set the precedent moving forward. Other thing about now who does this hurt? Because I'm tempted to say that this just hurts DraftKings. This just hurts FanDuel. And I don't care, right? If those books are hurt, it doesn't bother me. They hurt people all day long, right? They take advantage of addictions of people. And, and so if they have to get a taste of their own medicine, so to speak, then good for them, right? But I don't think it's as black and white as that. What about players who bet the over, right? What about people who are trying to have fun and lose money because they don't have information that other people have? That is who it hurts. And at the end of the day, I don't want a game of entertainment and a game that people are, researching and investing in to be compromised because of instances like this. So I do think this hurts the game. I do think it hurts innocent sports bettors who are maybe making informed decisions, not informed based on information that they have under the table, but just informed research-backed decisions. So I do think that while I'm tempted at first to say, who cares? I think it's deeper than that. A funny thing that happened this week related is Jason Tatum making this comment. I guess I do feel bad when I don't hit people's parlays. I don't want them to lose money. I just think it's hilarious that all of this happened in the same week. And you're not going to be the guy when this happens, be like, I don't care if my unders hit, like that. You can't come out and say that after somebody is under investigation. So just thought it was funny that he came out and said this. But in this article, he also stated that fans will yell things at him like, "Oh, get 2 more rebounds for my parlay." Like that's wild. Right. And I think that's affecting things. And I don't like the fact that while these players are in games, if it happens after the game on Twitter, we can't stop that. All right. And athletes have a choice to not read into that on Twitter. But if they're doing their job on the court, if they're in the game and players are yelling at them or fans are yelling at them from the sidelines saying things, I don't like that. I don't care for that at all. So that's an interesting piece of the puzzle in all of this. So my final take is that I do think Jontay Porter is involved in this situation. Whether he is being held against his will to perform a certain way because an organized crime group has him pinned in a corner, that's one thing. If he set this up with some buddies to make them some money, that's one thing as well. But do I think that in the next few weeks, months, or year, we will find out that Jontay Porter knew about this happening? I think it's more likely than not. So let me know what you guys think about all of this. The last thing I'll say is ESPN Bet. Conflict. It's just such a conflict of interest. It feels muddy to sit here and say, how dare Jontay Porter be involved in any way in sports betting? And then we have the biggest sports news organization, the face of a sports book. I think the next few years are going to be very interesting for sports and for sports betting. So as always, if you do any betting, bet responsibly. Follow me here. I talk betting all the time, and I try to talk about it in a way that is safe and practical for the masses. So just my 2 cents. Put that 2 cents on a parlay, and best of luck to you. We'll see you next time.